For most people today, taxes are an inconvenience, a frustration, a deduction from a paycheck. But in the Ottoman Empire, one of the most powerful empires in world history, taxes were not simply a way for the state to raise money. They were a weapon, a tool of domination, a system designed to extract wealth, loyalty, and control from millions of people across 3 continents. And behind that system was a ruthless, yet brilliantly engineered financial machine that kept the empire alive for more than 6 centuries. Welcome to HistoriNomica. In today's story, you're going to discover how the Ottomans built one of the most aggressive, sophisticated, and fear-inducing tax systems the world has ever seen. A system that shaped wars, economies, religions, and even the daily lives of ordinary people. A system that created vast fortunes for the elite while pushing many others into poverty, rebellion, and submission. And as you watch, you may start to recognize that some of the tactics used centuries ago still echo in modern governments today. So sit tight, grab your tea or coffee, and let's dive into the financial engine of the Ottoman Empire and the ruthless tax system that powered it. The Ottoman Empire began as a small frontier state in the late 1200s, but within just a few generations, it grew into a massive superpower stretching from Hungary to Arabia and from North Africa to the Persian Gulf. Maintaining such a vast empire required money. A lot of money. Armies, fortresses, navies, palaces, they all needed funding. And unlike many medieval states, the Ottomans didn't rely on random plunder or the generosity of nobles. Instead, they built an organized, relentless tax machine that funneled wealth directly into the Sultan's hands. At the core of this system was something called the Timar. It was not exactly land ownership. In fact, no Ottoman soldier truly owned land. Instead, the Sultan granted them the right to collect taxes from the people living on that land. A Timarnite, known as a Sipahi, received farmland, villages, and towns not to work but to extract revenue from. The villagers owed him a percentage of their harvest, a portion of their profits, and even special fees for weddings, funerals, and festivals. In return, the Sipahi was expected to provide cavalry soldiers for the Ottoman army whenever the Sultan called. This was clever. By giving soldiers the right to collect taxes instead of paying them a proper salary, the empire saved money. And at the same time, the soldiers had every reason to keep their district under control. The more peaceful and productive the village was, the richer the Sipahi became. But this system also had a dark side. Sipahis often squeezed peasants mercilessly. A bad harvest meant nothing. Taxes still had to be paid. Failure meant punishment, property seizure, or, in extreme cases, exile. For many villagers across Anatolia and the Balkans, the Ottoman tax collector was a far more terrifying figure than any invading army. But the Ottomans didn't stop there. Beyond the Timur system, they relied on something far more ruthless, the tax farm. This method was known as iltizam, and it turned taxation into a business. Instead of the government collecting taxes directly, the right to collect them was auctioned off to the highest bidder. Wealthy elites, traders, and even members of the imperial palace could buy these rights. Once they did, they squeezed as much money as possible from the population to make a profit. Imagine a rich merchant paying a huge sum up front to the government. In return, he received the right to collect taxes from a region for 1 year. If he collected more than he paid, he kept the difference. This system practically guaranteed exploitation. Tax farmers had no long-term interest in the well-being of the villages. Their only goal was to drain as much money as possible before their contract expired. In some areas, the tax farmers became notorious for brutality. They demanded payments early. They raised the tax rates whenever they felt like it. They confiscated livestock, crops, tools, and even family valuables. To protect themselves, villages often hired their own negotiators and intermediaries just to survive. But the most feared tax of all was one that targeted children. It was called the Devshirme, the blood tax. Every few years, Ottoman officials traveled through Christian territories, selecting strong and intelligent young boys. They were taken from their families, converted to Islam, and trained to become elite warriors, known as the Janissaries, or high-ranking administrators within the Ottoman bureaucracy. To many families, this was a devastating loss. Their sons were effectively taken by the state. But to the empire, Devshirme was a brilliant strategy. It created a loyal elite class that owed its power entirely to the Sultan. As the empire expanded, so did its tax appetite. Non-Muslims paid the jizya, a special tax that allowed them to practice their religion. It was meant to be a protective tax, but over time, it became another burden layered onto an already heavy tax load. Merchants paid customs taxes at every border, caravan stop, and port. Traders moving goods between cities often encountered multiple tax checkpoints along the way, each one demanding its share. Even everyday events were taxed: marriage ceremonies, property transfers, market stalls, owning a mill, using a bridge, employing a servant. Some regions even taxed beehives. Others taxed olive trees. If it could be counted, weighed, measured, or harvested, the Ottomans found a way to tax it. Many foreign visitors wrote in disbelief about the complexity of the system. The Ottoman Empire had tax registers so detailed that they listed not only the number of sheep in a village, but the number of beehives, the number of ovens, and the number of unmarried men. Nothing escaped the state's calculation. Yet despite its ruthlessness, the system was surprisingly efficient. Revenues flowed steadily to the empire's capital in Istanbul. The Sultan used this wealth to finance grand architectural projects, maintain massive armies, and keep the imperial court running. But the success of the system created its own downfall. As the empire aged, the Timar system weakened. Sipahis stopped showing up for military duty. Many Timar lands were illegally transferred or seized by powerful elites. And the rise of gunpowder warfare meant that cavalry soldiers were less important than cannons and muskets. This shift made the government even more dependent on tax farming, which only increased corruption. By the 1600s, tax farmers had grown incredibly wealthy. Some were richer than generals. Some manipulated auctions. Some bribed officials. They squeezed peasants harder than ever, causing rebellions, migrations, and economic collapse in several regions. In places like Anatolia, tax oppression became so severe that villagers abandoned their farmland entirely. Fields turned to dust. Local economies collapsed. Bandit groups rose in the countryside, fueled by anger at the oppressive tax collectors. The empire tried to fix the system. They created lifetime tax farms known as Malakain, hoping that giving tax farmers long-term control would make them behave more responsibly. But instead, it made them even more powerful. Wealthy individuals used tax farms to build huge financial networks, forming alliances that sometimes rivaled the state's authority. Meanwhile, the Devshirme, the child tax, slowly collapsed as Janissaries became corrupt, married, and demanded privileges. By the 1700s, the practice faded away entirely, but its legacy of fear and resentment remained. Over time, the Ottoman tax system became top-heavy, inefficient, and deeply unpopular. By the 1800s, as European powers industrialized and modernized their tax infrastructures, the Ottomans struggled with outdated methods and declining revenue. Their own subjects were exhausted by constant taxation, corruption, and exploitation. When the empire finally collapsed in the early 20th century, its tax system was one of the primary reasons behind its economic downfall. What had once been a brilliant financial engine had decayed into a machine of chaos, favoritism, and desperate extraction. But the story doesn't end there. Many aspects of the Ottoman tax system live on today. Modern Turkey still uses versions of Ottoman bureaucratic methods. Several Balkan and Middle Eastern countries inherited tax traditions that trace directly back to Ottoman rule. And the concept of tax farming, outsourcing revenue collection, is still used in certain parts of the world. The empire's brutal efficiency, its obsession with financial detail, and its willingness to extract wealth at any cost left a mark on history that cannot be ignored. When we talk about ruthless tax systems today, we often think of corrupt governance, aggressive audits, or complex tax codes. But the Ottomans built something far more extreme, an empire-wide machinery of extraction. To the villagers, merchants, traders, and families who lived under it, taxes were not numbers on a page. They were a daily reality, a fearful expectation, and sometimes a life-changing loss. For some, the system created opportunity. For most, it created hardship. But it undeniably powered one of the greatest empires in human history. The story of the Ottoman tax system is a reminder of a timeless truth. Money and power are inseparable. Empires rise when their financial engines run smoothly, and they fall when those engines turn against the people they are meant to support. Outro. If you enjoyed this journey into the financial machinery of the Ottoman Empire, don't forget to like the video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to HistoriNomica for more untold stories from history and finance. Your support helps us bring hidden chapters of the past to life. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.